Real Cuff Radio is about to begin.
I am a child of God. I'm no
Everybody
longer
loves a hero.
slave to fear.
I believe there's a hero in all of us.
I am a child.
Hey, today on Real Cup, we are going to be talking about some transgender issues, and we have a guy named Walt Heyer, and he actually was a transgender, has gone through it, went from a male to a female, and one of the things I want to say is you may not want to have your children listening to this show, and the other thing, too, I want to say, if you know somebody, or you have somebody in your family, or you are somebody yourself that's going through the hormone or getting ready to have an operation, you might want to listen to this show first, because I believe it can be a lifesaver. But I want you to hear the words this guy says. Welcome to Real Cuff Radio, and I've got someone on the line tonight that knows a lot about the transgender generation. I want to say, first of all, I want to thank him for being on here, because it takes a lot of courage to do this. I know that you get backlash from LGBT community and everything else, but I declare this guy is a Moses for the transgender generation, and I declare he's going to set the captives free. So today we've got Walt Heyer. And how are you doing today, Walt?
I'm doing outstanding. It's nice to be on with you.
And I've got Julie on the phone, too. How are you, Julie?
Hello. Fantastic.
Walt, if you just start and kind of share your testimony and just let them know how you ended up, in this transgender community.
Yeah. I was a 4-year-old kid and started cross-dressing, and my grandmother started affirming me by helping me cross-dress. And, looking back on that now, what I realized was her affirming me in this cross-gender behavior was child abuse and destructive emotionally and psychologically, and eventually planted the seed that was very hard to dismiss, that seed of transgender ideology, gender dysphoria, gender confusion. Even though I had a great desire and belief that God had made me in the wrong body, it takes years, decades to finally unravel all that stuff that was planted in my fertile little mind at the age of 4. So that little start with Grandma at the age of 4 stayed with me throughout my early life, and as a result of my grandmother cross-dressing me and me having this desire, my uncle thought it was fair game to molest me, so he took to molesting me when I was about 8 years old as a way of sort of teasing and mocking my cross-gender behavior. And but I continued to persevere through all of that, and eventually got into high school, and even I was sort of in my own head, I sort of had a dual personality. It wasn't outward, but I kept thinking all day long about this becoming a female, and while I was living the life of a young teen boy and playing in sports and having friends and eventually being in car clubs and doing all the guy things, there was still the girl that was living inside my head, that desire and belief that I was born in the wrong body. And eventually, like many people who identify as a transgender person, discovered, I was not homosexual. The vast majority of them, over 90% of them, are not homosexual. They're just dealing with deep problems in about their identity, what they're supposed to look like and present themselves. So that's what transgenders do. So I ended up falling in love with a gal at church, and we got married and had 2 kids. And on all outward appearances I was quite okay. Inside, though, I was still struggling with what had happened by that time, 20 or 25 years later. And I eventually went to school and studied engineering and drafting and became an associate design engineer on the Apollo space missions. And when I no longer wanted to do that, I went into the auto industry and became the national operations manager for American Honda Motor Company for all the ports of entry and the shipping of cars and handling of contracts. It was a very nice job. But I was still struggling with what had started when I was 4. It just never went away. There's never a day where it was not haunting me about being a different gender. So by the time I was in my late 30s, I started going to one of those people they call gender specialists. And I can tell you, if you ever see a gender specialist and you have gender problems, those are the last people you want to go to. So I went to the gender specialist. This particular one had, his name was Dr. Paul Walker, who had drafted the original standards of care for transgenders in 1979. So he was considered a world-leading expert in diagnosing and treating people who had struggled with gender dysphoria, which I had. So when he interviewed me and diagnosed me with gender dysphoria, he told me the only way that you can cure it is to take hormones and undergo gender reassignment surgery. But he said there's a 2-year waiting period, so I went through all of the hormone stuff and waited the 2 years, divorced my wife, left my kids, went and had surgery and became Laura Jensen, lost my career in the auto industry, and that was in October of 1983, and October 25th of 1983, as a matter of fact, on my birthday. And from that time forward, I have never really regained any kind of ability to gain employment, because back in the 80s that was taboo. I mean, a transgender person was pretty radical departure from many of the norms. So I struggled with alcoholism after that, and eventually started crawling my way back to sanity through psychotherapy while living as a transgender female named Laura Jensen, and eventually, after 8 years, during that 8-year period, I was studying psychology at UC Santa Cruz, and realized that transgender people are suffering from undiagnosed and untreated what they call comorbid disorders, which is a fancy word for an additional disorder that is just kind of under the surface, that is actually driving the desire to change genders. And in my case, it was the sexual abuse and the cross-dressing actually caused me to have a psychological comorbid disorder, which, by the way, 62.7% of all people who identify as a transgender person has a comorbid disorder that requires psychological treatment. In fact, if they were treated properly, they wouldn't have the desire to change genders. That's how serious those disorders are. So affirming somebody in a cross-gender identity is actually causing them to eventually have a mental disorder, depression, anxiety, and that's why we see a large portion of this population, over 40% of them, will attempt suicide just out of complete despair for the fact that all people do is give you hormones and cut body parts off and identify you in a different gender without ever dealing with the underlying comorbid disorders that were causing you to have the desire to change genders, which started for me many years later. So once I found that out, I began looking into psychology and treating the disorder with psychotherapy and help through the church. And eventually, thank the good Lord, I was able to what they call detransition, which is a fancy word for going back to reality and sanity, and reassumed my name as Walt. That's happened. That was 25 years ago. So I've been married for 20 years, and now I'm on a mission to stand with the Lord and to help people understand that there isn't anybody that identifies as a transgender person who needs hormones or surgery. This is a total, what I call one of the biggest medical falsehoods of all time. It's the idea that this is medically necessary.
Hey, Walt.
Yeah.
Walt, let me ask you a question. Let me go back to Dr. Paul Walker. Do you think that the doctors get kickbacks from sending you to have the surgery?
You know, you never know. I mean, they do write the letter and they do send it to a specific surgeon. So, you know, that possibility certainly exists. And Walker was a friend of Biber, and you know, Biber had, by the time I went to Biber, he had already done. The reason
I ask that is because they do it so fast and they try to get you in there. You know, there's a 2-year waiting period, but we got to get you going now. If you know. And when you start rushing stuff like that, there's usually some kind of something going on in the background.
Well, it's either that or they're afraid you're going to change your mind and find out that they're duping you. And you know, so most of us, if we had someone helping us understand what's going on and waited 5 or 10 years, we'd never do it.
Yeah, got you. Okay, so I want to ask something about your grandmother. Did your grandma? I know you had a brother, correct?
Yeah.
So did your grandmother? Anything happen with your brother, or was it just you?
Well, that was interesting. We both had different grandparents, and so my brother always went to my other grandmother's house, and I went to this one. Neither grandmother ever had both of us at the same time.
Oh, got you. Okay. Did she want a granddaughter, or you never did find out why she started doing this, did you?
No, I have no idea whether I just don't know. You know, that's always been a mystery to me.
Yeah. Yeah, and they were from Texas, correct?
Yeah, they were from just outside of Dallas, Texas, and so I don't know why she did that. I think I encouraged her to, but you know, that shouldn't be reason enough. And I think that's what I see so much today. Primarily, mothers are, you know, buying into this transgender ideology and helping their kids, if they're boys, become girls. And you know, I saw a television show that was so startling, where they were filming the young boy mother had been dressing him as a girl. He had long hair, and mom's brushing his hair, and the cameras are rolling, and so all of a sudden the kid turned around and looked at mom with the camera rolling and said, "Would you love me if I was a boy?" Yeah,
I could see that. There's one over in Europe at 12 years old, and the mom helped him, you know, get on the hormones and everything else. You know, well, at 14 he realized, you know, what am I doing? And so now they won't do the surgery to remove the breast or fix the breast or whatever. So they're having to go they're going to South Korea to have it done, because they will not do it until he's 16, you know, where he lives. But they were not supposed to even start any hormone stuff till he was 16, but they did it anyway.
Yeah, I know. They're doing a lot of this, and they're ruining a lot of kids' lives, and everybody thinks it's really jolly good time, and it's not good at all.
There was something you mentioned about stuff that triggers you, and on Bruce Jenner.
Yeah,
I heard you mention something on another show about what you believe probably triggered him. And I thought, wow, if you would share that with the audience.
Sure. I don't think there's one trigger, but there's usually one sort of last straw that kind of can push people over. And in Jenner's case, when he won the decathlon and was the world's greatest athlete, Porsche gave him a new Porsche and delivered it to his house with all these people standing around in the driveway, as I understand. And his younger 16-year-old brother wanted to drive the car, and so Bruce handed his little brother the keys. The little brother took the car, the Porsche, and went and picked up his girlfriend, and 45 minutes later they were both dead from crashing into a tree with the Porsche. Well, that's pretty heavy-duty stuff to deal with, and the grieving and the loss of a brother. I mean, that's traumatizing, and that's what I see with transgenders, people who identify as transgenders always have something they're trying to escape from. And in Jenner, following that, he had a auto accident in California, I believe in 2014 or 2015, and he was driving down the Pacific Coast Highway, towing an off-road vehicle with his Escalade Cadillac, and rear-ended somebody that catapulted them across the center divider that hit head-on with another car, and another person was deceased as a result of a vehicular accident. So it was only a short time after that vehicular accident that Jenner came out as Caitlin and transitioned from male to female. And what we know about being identifying as a transgender is it's a dissociation, and dissociation means that you don't want to be who you are, so you attempt to try to become someone who you can never be. And so I believe that while there are many other factors probably involved in Bruce's case, that certainly was a curious possible contributing factor, with 3 people dying as a result of him and automobiles.
Well, my wife had a dream about Bruce, and if you want to share that, Julie.
Basically, it was a dream that he was coming to our house in Malibu on the beach, and as he approached the house, he was back as Bruce in a nice suit. I just was beginning to pray for him as he was approaching and welcomed him into our house with a appropriate hug. So just because of this dream, I just was like, I believe that he will make a decision to walk in his God-given identity.
Yeah, and I believe that too. I described that on CNN TV with Carol Costello. I said, it's sort of like a drunk goes into a bar, and he's drinking all night long and having a great time. And then he goes to bed and wakes up in the morning. He's got this terrible hangover. And while Bruce may be enjoying much of the spotlight right now, there's going to be a time when Bruce is all alone, and he's going to realize that he is not a female, and that this was all done out of some deep unresolved issues that he has, and so he's going to sober up, and the Lord's going to get a hold of him, and he's going to detransition, which I'm seeing quite a bit of, and even a doctor in Yugoslavia who does a lot of transition surgeries, seeing more and more people, not great numbers in his one clinic, but he's seeing more people request what they call detransition surgery. So many people regret having the surgery, and we know that over 40% of them attempt suicide. And when you have people attempting suicide, it's a fairly easy thing to assume that they have regrets and they are not happy, because I don't know anybody that's happy with their life that's spending their time trying to end it.
That's correct.
I'd like to know, in your experience, did the church help you at all? Are they having classes to address what your identity is in Christ? I mean, how did you receive help from church at all, other than?
Well, it's funny. The very first church I went to, I was Laura, and I still wanted to identify as church. And I went to the church, and all the ladies there embraced me, sat with me in church, and we had coffee after church. And I went home, and that afternoon the senior pastor came to my house, knocked on my door, walked in. One of the ladies I'd been sitting with happened to be the pastor's wife, and I'm sitting there as Laura. And the pastor informed me, he said, "We don't want your kind in our church." And I said, "Really?" I said, "What kind are you looking for?" So some churches don't do such a good job, but they don't do classes on your identity being in Christ. They struggle with people who have such an outward expression of deep-seated issues, and transgenders are without a doubt the most overt expression of something much deeper hurting them. So I call them scary people. For the church, transgenders just scare churches, and I have gone to a few churches and spoke to the church. I have on my website, Transgender's Faith, a request for churches if they want to sit down with the leadership and have a fireside chat and talk about how to better embrace the transgender community and actually be effective in helping them detransition. If they're not defiant and they're compliant to a desire to have a relationship with Christ, they can actually be very effective.
Well, I think the churches need to realize they don't have to just open their doors and say, "Hey, we want every transgender to come in here." But if they don't start doing something soon, their children, that are in the church now, they're going to find out they're struggling with the same problems, and they're going to be going down the same road you did.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean,
I see it all the time in there, and this kid's struggling with it, and yet the church doesn't say anything.
No, I fortunately, once in a while, there's a church that'll come out. I mean, I spoke at what I would refer to as a redneck church in North Carolina who, the pastor, he wears camo when he preaches on Sunday, and he says, "We got to straighten these folks out. They need to hear this message. Get up here and you tell them." So, we need the message out there that the church is the place for transgenders, but the church needs to be equipped and ready to effectively assist them and not just be a place where they're going to look out of the corner of their eye at them and wonder what are they going to do next,
Yeah. And I believe, your voice is that light to the world that is so in darkness right now, that unless the church, the Christians get behind you and back you, how do you know what God has called you to do?
Yeah. That's a great question because, we've got a lot of work to do. There's a lot of churches out there and there's a lot of hurting people. And I think, to be perfectly honest, many pastors just flat out do not want to discuss this issue. They don't even have it tripping off their lips. And I'll tell you another thing that is amazing. I was on staff in a very large church as the director of care ministries, which was a pastoral position, but they wouldn't give me the title of pastor because I had been a transgender. And further, the church didn't want anybody in the church to know that I had been a transgender. They wanted it a secret rather than take the time to celebrate the redemption and restoration that Christ can have in the life of a transgender, they wanted me to remain silent.
Well, unfortunately, I can see that happening, but
yeah.
That's
what we're up against in getting the message out, though, until, the transgenders are coming out and expressing where they are and how they're mixed up, in my view, but the churches just clam up and are afraid to talk about it. And there's a few churches that do a great job. Don't get me wrong. They're out there and they're confronting it and they're doing a good job. I spoke to a national group of pastors, youth pastors in Colorado this year, and they were all very interested in knowing, how they could help with the growing transgender discussion. And so there are churches that are really trying hard to do this. So, but there's a lot more churches that just won't touch it. It's taboo.
Let's talk a little bit more about when you were Laura. Now, you went and you actually got you changed your birth records and your driver's license.
Oh, yeah.
Now, but how can they legally do that? Isn't that falsifying documents?
Well, in my view, it's falsifying documents, but today, they've completely bought in, the states have all completely bought into this whole idea about you can change any of these documents basically anytime you want. Today, in California, you can change, if you're a male, to be in a female without ever undergoing any surgery.
I was going to say, that's something that Trump needs to look into while he's there.
I wish he would. I've sent him a letter telling him I'd like to talk with him and discuss this.
Well, I know that during the Obama reign, basically, how many of the LGBT people did he put into positions?
250. And one of them was on staff in the White House that was a transgender.
I don't think a lot of people realize that.
No, and not only that, most everybody he had in the administration in the White House on staff was somehow directly connected to the head honchos of all the major TV networks. And as a result of Obama's pressure to push, I called Obama the titular head of the LGBT because ABC primetime television with Obama in the White House, over 50% of their primetime content had LGBT characters, lesbians, gays, transgenders, and others in their shows. And that was a big push. In fact, the TV networks had what they called LGBT-sensitive people on the staff of the networks, and they prevented me from being on television.
I can see that. Yeah. They don't want your voice heard.
No, I'm the enemy.
You spent 8 years as Laura.
Yeah.
But when you first went and you had the operation, you were immediately fired from your job, correct?
Yeah. Well, I had the operation, and I waited till I got some of the documents straightened out, and I had a lawyer in place, and then told the company, and they fired me immediately on the day that I told them, and they never let me back on the property. And so I was gone, but then my attorney that I had there in case something happened, just so she had to leave and go to New York and couldn't represent me. So I had no legal representation and was never able to regain any legal action against American Honda Motor Company. So there you go.
All right. And you basically ended up homeless because you got divorced from your wife of 17 years at that point. And, so, but that's kind of how you started getting back into the church, was from there, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, I didn't always disconnect from the church. I just didn't really know how to connect with Jesus Christ. That was the struggle for me. It's one thing to be a person going to church, and it's another person to develop a personal relationship with Christ. And just attending church or, quote, being a religious person doesn't get you a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. It takes obedience and reverence to Christ, and it requires you to give your life up and turn it over to Christ.
When you talk about your grandmother basically planting the seed in you, was that a demonic, like a demon or something?
No, I don't see it that way. It's just how I can express to people listening what happens in your thinking. You just it makes you start to believe that you were born wrong, that you really should have been a girl. That's not demonic. It's just, young minds, a 4-year-old mind is a fresh and fertile, untouched soil that you can plant any seed in and nurture it. My grandmother could have taught me how to speak Chinese at 4 years old. She could have taught me to be a fireman, or she could have taught me to be play musical instruments or something constructive. We could do that with our children, but instead, this was the direction that came down the pipeline for me, and that's been my life struggle to deal with it. Thankfully, the Lord redeemed me and restored me from the madness, but still, you can't restore everything that the surgeons do. You still have to deal with many of the past things, but your relationship with Christ gives you the freedom to not have it burden you.
I mean, even at that too, whatever they try to reverse, first of all, they really mutilate everything, so there's not a lot to reverse. I showed my wife a video exactly of the surgery and everything last night, but the other problem too is all the scar tissue ends up resulting in a lot more problems down the road.
Yeah, I mean, there's some doctors doing they're working on doing what is called a phalloplasty, and they're becoming more and more successful, and I expect in the years to come they'll be able to be successful at that. Unfortunately, they're developing the technology to help females become males, but what it's going to probably benefit more is the male who became a female. It will benefit them when the technology and the surgery gets better to be able to restore more of what was taken.
Well, how about you share a little bit? I know that when Christ restored you, you had a vision and everything. You want to share leading up to that and what happened?
Yeah, I mean, I'd been going to psychotherapy to deal with my past and the things I was struggling with, and alcoholism was one of them. And so doing my 4th step, which people that are listening to the show, if they know the 4th step, they know it's one where you sit down and with someone that you trust and disclose to them many things of the past that you want to sort of deal with and dismiss. And so I did that with a psychotherapist who happened to be a Christian, and we went through this many pages of things that I wanted the Lord to take and actually lay them at his feet. And so we did that for 2.5 hours, and when we were done that day, we went back into his office and began to pray. And at that time, the Lord, I could actually see the Lord, a vision of the Lord coming to me, all dressed in white with his arms stretched out. And I could see myself as a newborn baby, and he was picking me up, and he just whispered the words, "You are safe with me now forever." And then the prayer was over, and he was gone. And I realized that he had come to redeem and restore me at that moment. And So I've committed myself as best I can to serve him for the rest of my life in this capacity of trying to prevent others from this totally unnecessary transgender ideology of surgery and hormones.
Like I said earlier in the show, that I know that you probably get a lot of backlash and everything from it, but I'm glad that there are people like you that are willing to stand up and speak for these people and, help them. Well, we might as well say it right now. You have a website, and your website is called sexchangeregret.com.
Yeah.
And that's where they can go to find out all this information, and we'll have it posted, at the bottom. You want to tell them a little bit about the different things that you do and how you help other people work through this?
Yeah, I have people contact me all the time through the website daily. Some of them are asking for themselves, some of them for a grandson, some of them for their own kids, family members, sisters, brothers. They're asking me to help them find some kind of way to help them understand that they don't need to go through this surgical procedure and the hormones, or if they've gone through it, how they can find help to detransition. And so I do that. Also, I've traveled to Italy, Canada, Australia, recently Hong Kong, to speak to colleges. I've spoken at Rutgers University, Princeton, the University of Hong Kong. I've been on television documentaries in Russia, the UK, Australia. I've done a show that's very much like 60 Minutes in Canada. It's called 16 by 9. So I reach an estimated 300 million people a year with the message. And if people want to help keep me going, they can go to waltheyer.com, and there's a donate button. I'm not a 501. I don't have huge resources. I survive solely on people's generous gifts so that I can travel and speak at churches. Some churches are kind enough to be able to pay an honorarium, and some aren't. So we survive. I'll be on Wednesday, I'll be 77 years old. So I'm getting up in my years, but still cranking and can use all the support I can get. But I work to help anybody and everybody I can. I've never, ever charged anybody in 10 years a dime for giving them guidance or working through the issues they have. I've had people call me the day they were thinking about committing suicide, and one of them I spent months with, and eventually he was able to overcome his desire to take his life, and he's now restored himself and is back working again, and so he was distraught over having done the surgery to the degree that he just wanted to blow his brains out. And so with the Lord's help and tenacity, we were able to sort of pull him off the ledge. It doesn't mean his life is totally good. He still struggles, but at least that's what we do. We help everybody we can. And for the people who don't like what I do, I don't pay much attention to them, because I'm only assigned by the Lord to help the people who really want help.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. Julie, did you have anything you wanted to say?
Yeah, I did. I was just sitting there thinking about today at a prayer group, there was a young lady who brought up two of her friends have already approached her on this issue. And I was just wondering, if you had a friend say that they had desires to become a female or mentioned any of this verbiage, what would be the first thing that you would suggest for people to do at that moment when somebody just brings you information that you didn't even expect?
Yeah, well, I've had that happen, and I had it happen just a couple of days ago. So what I do is I begin to talk to them, and if they have any idea of what happened that traumatized them, because I always know something happened. So the first thing that you want them to do is have a good enough relationship with that person where they can sit down and have a cup of coffee with them and say, gee, when did this start? Because we know you're not born that way, but what happened? And like the one a couple of days ago, we found out that the person also had been sexually molested. And so people want to escape the pain, and that's why I use the word dissociate. So we need to find out why the person wants to change genders, and once the person hears from somebody else that, you know, do you realize that this your desire to change genders is because you were traumatized, you were sexually abused, you were emotionally abused, or physically abused, or abandoned, or it sort of changes their perspective because you know, you're showing an interest in them, and I think that in of itself helps them a great deal, just to know that you care enough to ask.
That's easy enough to understand where to go with it, and to honestly, it's just to allow them to talk and open up.
That's right. That's exactly right. You want to create a safe place for them to be willing to share, that knowing that you're not going to blab it around the world, that you're just interested in hearing how they got hurt.
Just for me alone, Walt, this was very educational. When I started kind of doing research and stuff and hearing you talk, and you know, and probably a lot of other people automatically assume that all these transgender people are homosexual. And, you know, so there's little things you start realizing, going, wait a minute, you know, because that's kind of what you've heard over the years. And so I'm really glad you came on today and really enjoyed the show. And by the way, let me be the first to tell you happy birthday.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Well, it was great to be on. And, you know, anytime I'm on the same set or show or conference with the homosexuals that are there, I always kind of make fun with them, and we enjoy each other. But I always say, you know, I just do not understand those homosexual people at all. So I'll just let them tell their story, because I don't really know any transgenders who are homosexual.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. And I guess that's a wrap.
Hey, this is Real Cuff, and I want to thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe. YouTube completely removed our channel for a couple of years, but now we're back. Thank you.